Welcome back, scholars. We are now going to finish up with our lesson for today with our text and our independent practice. So, scholars, in front of you, you should have your T chart. Your T chart should show Mark Anthony's decisions. Now, we have already labeled each box, so we know that we're going in and we're looking for two strengths and one weakness. Again, our focus question for today was if Mark Anthony decisions strengthened or weakened his leadership. So as we go in, we're looking to find evidence. We're going to make a claim to support when it strengthens and a claim to support when his leadership is weakened by his decisions. So scholars, go ahead. We are going to start on page 67. Reunion and renewal. So as we start, we're answering the first question, and we know that Mark Anthony has decided to marry Octavia. And so we need to describe the beginnings of Mark Anthony and Octavia's marriage. What do we learn about their interactions with Parthia? Scholars, we are going to start on page 67, and I am actually reading aloud all of 67, and then at the very top of page 68. Again, we are describing the beginnings of Mark Anthony's and Octavia's marriage. Now, remember, this is a strength. So, we are going to make a claim based on how was the beginning of their marriage a strength in his decision. Again, we're starting at page 67, reunion and renewal. In the summer of 39 BC, Octavia gave birth to a daughter. Mark Antony, ready to redirect his attention to Parthian campaign, moved his family to Athens to set up his headquarters. From there, he sent his most trusted general ahead to lead the first strike. Mark Antony's troops soundly defeated the Republican general who had been connected to Cassius. Furthermore, the battle on June 9th, 39 BCE, marked the first time Rome had ever claimed victory over the Parthians. Meanwhile, Octavia and Mark Antony settled into life among the Athenians, who made them feel right at home. Soon, the citizens included them in all aspects of civil life. Mark Antony directed athletic events held in his honor. The couple participated in sacred ceremonies, dressing and acting as the new Dionysus and Athena, the patron goddess of the city. They hosted banquets, they attended festivals. Coins minted in the cities at the time showed Mark Antony and Octavia on one side and symbols of religious rites on the other. Life in Athens was off to a promising start. So, scholars, I have read pages 37 and the top of page 38. We are going in and to describe the beginning of Mark Antony's and Octavia's marriage. How is this a strength? I want you to take a few minutes of think time. I didn't mean to say minutes, a few seconds of think time. All right, now I want us to go ahead and write our claim. What claim are we going to make to show that the beginning of Mark Antony and Octavia's marriage was a strength in Mark Antony's decision? I'm going to give us 1 minute to write this claim. Let's go. All right. So, scholars, on my paper, I wrote that the strength was that Mark Anthony and Octavia's marriage had a very strong start and that they were very involved in the culture of Rome. So now that we have that down, we need to go in and find our best piece of evidence to support the claim that Mark Anthony and Octavia's marriage was off to a very strong start and that they were very involved in the culture of Rome. We have 1 minute. Let's go. All right, scholars, on my T chart, my strength was Mark Anthony and Octavia's marriage had a strong start. They were very involved in the culture of Rome. And then my evidence is one, they have a child, they make Athens their home, they participated in sacred ceremonies, they hosted banquets, they were very active in the activities in Rome, and they had a victory over Parthia. So these are my evidence to support the claim that I made. So now that we have one strength, we are now going to go into our text and we're going to read starting at page 68. Now, I am going to read the first paragraph of page 68, keeping peace in the family. As I read this paragraph, I want you to consider Octavian's, the brother, and Mark Anthony's relationship. What specific event happens and what is the cause for this? All right. Again, page 68, keeping peace in the family. Octavia also managed to keep the peace between her brother and her husband as their arguments heated up, their disagreements escalated. Late in 38 BCE, Octavian called a meeting that insisted that Mark Antony attend. It could not have been at a more inconvenient time for Mark Antony to drop everything and arrange to go to Italy. The Parthian campaign was in full force, and there were plenty of things to take care of at home. Even so, Mark Antony managed to get to Italy as directed. He must have been furious when Octavian never showed up. Pressing business turned Octavian's attention elsewhere. It seemed he did not need to meet with Mark Antony after all. So, scholars, we just heard that piece of information from our text. Now, I want you to think through how can I describe Octavian's and Mark Antony's relationship? What specific event happened and what was the cause for it? Give yourself a few moments of think time. Now that you have considered that, we are now going to write our claim. You will have 1 minute to write your claim, right? Your minute has started. If you complete your claim, be sure to go ahead and start and finding your evidence. All right. So, scholars, in the text, we read about Octavian requiring Mark Antony to come to a meeting. And in return, Mark Antony drops everything. He makes it back to Italy to go to the meeting. But Octavian does not show because something else came up. And it turns out that the meeting between Octavian and Mark Antony wasn't necessarily needed. So, based on Mark Antony's decision to go back, make sure that he makes this meeting. Does that strengthen or weaken his leadership? I wrote that it did weaken the relationship and his leadership because frustration between Octavian and Mark Antony grew. The reason it grew is because Mark Anthony dropped everything to go to this meeting, and then Octavian didn't even show. So I now need to go back into the text and find my piece of evidence to support the claim that I made. Scholars, I'm going to challenge you. Paraphrase your piece of evidence. I am actually only giving you 30 seconds to provide a piece of evidence to show how frustrations between Octavian and Mark Anthony started to grow. Giving you 30 seconds. You can go ahead and start writing now while I set the timer. Your 30 seconds has started. All right, scholars. So on our T chart, I have marked the this weekend Mark Anthony's leadership in his decision to go to the meeting because frustration between Octavian and Mark Anthony grew. Now, my piece of evidence was that Octavian demands Mark Anthony to attend a meeting, but Octavian doesn't show up himself. And I mean, it's quite natural. I would be upset too if I had to drop everything, come to a meeting, and then the person that required or demanded I be at the meeting does not show up. So this is my best piece of evidence to support the claim that I made that frustration between Mark Anthony and Octavian started to grow. So, scholars, as we dive into the last section of the text, we are on page 68. We're now looking for a strength. And the strength is Mark Anthony made the decision to marry Octavia. Now, did his marriage to Octavia strengthen his leadership or did it weaken his leadership? As we go in, we are focused on what role does Octavia play between her brother and her husband and why. Scholars, we're reading page 68. We're reading the second paragraph. In the 37 BCE, Mark Antony again traveled to Italy to meet with Octavian. Thanks to Octavia's efforts, her husband and brother put aside any hard feelings. The two generals were able to draw up a treaty. Together with Mark Lepidus, they renewed the terms of the Second Triumvirate for another 5 years. They also agreed upon the troops exchange. Octavian would receive 120 of Mark Antony's ships to add to his fleet. In return, he would send Mark Antony 20,000 troops to continue the Parthian expedition. So, scholars, we are now considering What role does Octavia play between her brother and her husband? Also, scholars, on top of page 68, the very first paragraph, it also says Octavia also managed to keep the peace between her brother and her husband as their arguments heated up, their disagreements escalated. So, a few moments of think time. Now, scholars, let's go in and write our claim. What role did Octavia play between her brother and her husband? And we know that this role is to strengthen Mark Anthony's leadership. Let's go ahead and write. Let's go. Take about 10 more seconds. So, scholars, I wrote that Octavia is the peacemaker between her brother and her husband. I now need to go in and find evidence to support Octavia being the peacemaker. Again, our challenge is to paraphrase our evidence. We have 30 seconds. So, scholars, I did write the strength was Octavia was the peacemaker between her brother and her husband. And the evidence that I used to support that claim was they were able to make a treaty. They were able to renew the triumvirate for 5 years. And he, Mark Anthony, and Octavian also traded resources. So these are three pieces of evidence that will help me support my claim that Octavia was the peacemaker between her husband and her brother. So, scholars, on your T chart, you should have two things that strengthen Mark Anthony's ability in leadership, and one thing that weakened his leadership based off of his decisions. Again, we should have two strengths and one weakness. We're moving. So, scholars, our focus for today was what decisions did Mark Anthony make and did they strengthen his leadership? Again, what decisions did Mark Anthony make and did they strengthen his leadership? At this time, scholars, I want you to think in your head, did they strengthen his leadership? Yes or no? Go ahead on your T chart, right? Yes, they strengthened his leadership, or no, they did not strengthen his leadership. Get ready, go. So now that you have written your take or your thoughts on if they strengthen or weaken his leadership, it is now time to write a claim. When we write our claim, you're going to tell me yes, they strengthen, or no, they did not strengthen. But most importantly, you're going to tell me why. Again, when you write your claim, it isn't a complete sentence, and you're going to tell me why. I'm going to give you 1 minute and 30 seconds to write your claim in explaining yes, they strengthen or no, they strengthen, but be sure to write why. And you're writing your claim on your T-chart. Let's go. One minute. Twenty-five seconds. A devil's advocate. Normally, this is my Edwin. If he knows that the class is going to say yes, he's definitely going to say no. So I am being a mini Edwin today. So I wrote a yes and a no. My yes is yes. Most of the decisions Mark Anthony made strengthened his leadership in Egypt and in Rome. Now my no. Although many of the decisions Mark Anthony made were meant to strengthen his leadership, too many of them may have actually fractured the relationships he needed. So, scholars, I have made two claims. One says yes, the other says no. Scholars, we are now at our independent practice. As you complete your independent practice, be sure that you respond using a complete sentence with an inference or a because statement. In today's independent practice, you are answering the question if Mark Anthony's decisions strengthened or weakened his leadership. So be sure to tell why you think they strengthen or why you think they weaken his leadership. Thank you for your hard work. I cannot wait to see you on tomorrow to dive deeper into Cleopatra.